bottom of page Nun Dalet, right? 3 dots on the bottom.
How many lines? 3 lines?
3 lines?
How many lines?
3.
Oh.
Is it raining?
It started raining. It's drizzling actually.
It's nothing.
Nothing.
All right. Ready? Yeah. So, in discussing the whole principle of bracha, we got into discussing the phenomenon of alma de iskasya and alma de isgalya. The concealed world and the revealed world. The concealed world clearly does not mean that it's concealed because something is blocking it from being visible, from being seen. But the concealed world means that it is invisible in its essence. And the reason that it's invisible is because it's not as yet a full-fledged metzius. It's not really a world yet. And the revealed is where it becomes defined as a metzius. And the muscle that we for this is oisis hamachshava and oisis hadibur. Where we explain that machshava the oisis are not real oisis, meaning that essentially there is the oil itself that is present, and the oases are hardly identifiable. Okay, so this we went over many times. So let us continue. 3 lines from the bottom. Umikol mokoim, yet still, harei tchilas ha'hizhavus hu bo'olam habriah. The beginning of creation is actually in the world of briah. That is where the beginning is. This is what we said all along, that there is the first presence. This is like Choyer Morishin, the first presence. And we discussed the principle of the first. So even though it is the first, and therefore the emphasis over there is in the oil rather than in the Metzias, nevertheless, that is the first Metzias. Here's his habits. And that which comes later on into Olam HaYitzira. As I said, Yitzira means the world of design. That does not possess the principle of his chachus, of innovation on the principle level. Like a double chodesh, like something totally novel. The kvar nizhave hakoil ba'olam habriah. Because everything was already created at the level of olam habriah. Behu iker ha-hischachus. And that is the principle of hischachus. They will pursue it a little bit, and again at the end of the principal message, we will try and discuss it further and what is the significance of all this. The al-shumzeh nikro briah. Well, this is the reason that it's called briah. Al-shumzeh, in describing this principle that it is chachus, this is why it's called briah. Briah means creation. Shekosav Haramban Zal. This is what the Ramban Zal writes, that briah, the word briah, represents something created that is totally novel. It's a new creation. And briah is, why the Shem Boro Meire al Hischachus Dover. Ramban writes, the Shem Boro, that this term Boro, that refers to, that indicates that there is Hischachus Dover, there's a total novelty. Something, there's no precedent for this in, that's what briah, new creation. Again, I said we'll come to a point, and perhaps it will give us a little perspective. Thus, we have concluded that hischachus hayesh, that the total innovation, novelty of the principle of a yesh, of a presence of a creature, hu ba'olam habriah dafka. It is specifically and exclusively in the world of briah. And then subsequently, anything that was created that came into being in the world of Yitzira, Hakoil Kvar Nizhava Ba'olam Habriah. All already was created as present in Olam Habriah. So again, what is this about? what is the significance of the word oilam, the world, the created world? And as we spoke before, that in the Lakus, that initially it's called Ayin efes muchlat. It's called the absolute nothingness. And from that, then begins the term creation, which is a mitzvah. As Ovenia pointed out, even what, yeah.
I would like to question the notion of absolute nothingness. In regards to Elokus.
All right, before we go there, what is the significance of saying that it is absolute nothingness, as we already went over many times? The principle, no matter how many times we will discuss the principle and we'll discuss it, you have to remember that this is not something that can possibly be understood, because this is, to understand something, it has to be a mitzvah. It's not a nothingness. How can you understand what something that's nothingness? What we can understand is, what is the meaning, what is the significance of this? It seems to be that we are celebrating. We say, oh, it's absolute nothingness. That kind of denotes its supremacy, its greatness. What is it? What is the meaning? It's absolute nothingness. So again, for our purposes, what we need to bear in mind is, like the Rambam says, that the first principle is that there is a first being, Motzurish, a first being that has not been preceded by another being. This being does not come from another being. It's a first being. So we, in our little mind, immediately scratch us. Where does that being come from? Right? It's the first being. Where does that being come from? Is that a valid question?
No.
Why not?
Because it pre-exists anything.
Okay, so what does that mean? So where does that being come from?
It's not a valid question.
Huh?
It's not a valid question, you said.
Yeah, I said. But I want to each understand that it's not a valid question. This is just a plain of words. What does it mean it's not a valid question?
If we say there is a first being, that means nothing preceded it.
Right. So this is just a form of speech. But in our mind, what does it mean? The first being that nothing preceded it. What is it? How come it's there? So the whole principle of saying, oh, it is a first being, and the question where it's coming from is not a valid question. It's not a valid question only if you focus in and understand what it means that it's a first being. Because in terms of a being, it's a being. The point is, the first being means that it's not a being that consists in an identifiable presence. This is called Ayin efes, muchlat. Absolute nothingness. Absolute nothingness means he doesn't have to justify his presence. He is there by virtue of the truth, of his own truth. This is not something that needs to come into being. There's no way that we can conceptualize that mitzvah, that presence. Because anything that we can conceptualize, has these two states. Here is a state where before I conceptualize it, and then after I conceptualize, which means that when I got to conceptualize it, I'm identifying something. Identifying something is a way not efes and muchlat.
One more time, our conception is limited to something that you come to discover. That I didn't catch this.
Our whole thinking process begins at a certain point. Before you conceptualize it, and then the thinking starts. Right? So therefore, if the thinking starts at a certain point, that means that there is something there to think about. And prior to thinking of it, there's nothing there. So there is an entity that you're thinking of. It's not nothing. It has a beginning.
When we conceptualize something, we don't think that it started at the moment of our conception. We can acknowledge that things preceded our conceptualization of them.
Right. So the question, again, if you want to understand what you're saying, is this something that you can conceptualize and not conceptualize?
Is there a subject of which we can and cannot conceptualize at the same time?
Right, not at the same time. So, sequentially.
Are there things that are beyond our conception and later we conceptualize?
No, this which you're talking about, the conceptualization of this. You can conceptualize it and not conceptualize it.
Yeah.
If it has these two states, then it is a present, then it's a mitzvah.
Meaning if there is an option of conceptualizing it?
Yeah.
Then it's a mitzvah. So that's to say it's kind of has definitions.
It has a presence. Here is where it's present, here is where it's not present. I'm trying to explain something which, again, I wish you understand. I'm not trying that you should conceptualize it. All I'm trying to explain that when we say Ayin the efes muchlat, it is not conceptualizable.
Yeah.
Because if it's conceptualizable, it's not Ayin the efes muchlat.
Right.
And what is the significance of it being Ayin the efes muchlat? The significance of this is that yes, indeed, it cannot, as we say all the time, it cannot not be. Since it cannot not be, therefore its being is not a being of positive presence. Because anything of a positive presence cannot be. Because it can be not present. And this is something that cannot not be. That means that it doesn't have a positive presence. What is the significance of this? Again, it is for us to understand that the godliness is an absolute truth. It is not something that we can conceptualize or non-conceptualize. The question, like we say, that the world, does God exist, is a misrepresentation of the question.
An invalid question or misrepresentation?
It's an invalid question. Because the principle that God exists is that no matter how deeply you doubt his existence, you yourself know that he exists because it's impossible not to know it. There's no way that one can conceptualize that it doesn't exist. This is what the Rambam says. This is a word from the Rambam. Right? The same halacha that you're quoting all the time. The first principle is to know that there's a first being. And from this first being, everything comes to be. And should it be conceptualized, thought, that he does not exist, then nothing can possibly exist.
But you cannot conceptualize of him not existing, but somehow, yes, you can conceptualize of him yes existing. The fact that we sense reality is our conception.
No, when we conceptualize that he exists is not conceptualization per se. But we know that he exists as a first being. Not that he exists as a presence. He exists in a state of non-presence. unidentifiable existence.
The positive is possible, but the negative not.
No. Forget about, we are trying to identify what he is. See, that's the big mistake. And this is natural thinking. What then is it?
Uh-huh.
We're not trying to identify what he is.
Mm-hmm.
Because identify what he is already falling off the principle itself.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that we can identify for what it is has a finite presence. I want to something which we discussed this week, and it's like a missing of the recordings. I want to present the following point. And the principle that this is based on is that, in fact, in the human soul there is a principle of truth that gives us, that allows us to think of this truth. And we always say, in principle, that just as we said, the simple thing, that when we walk on the street, and we can walk in a straight line, we're not walking on a narrow line. We are walking on the entire earth. I think everyone understood this principle. Person walks on the earth, but he's walking on a narrow line, but on the earth itself. But he's not walking on an isolated line, like a tightrope. He's always standing solidly on the entire globe. Huh?
Is this related to...
One second. Why? Why is it? Why is it? Why does an animal, a cat, walk on a narrow path, and a human being walks on the entire globe? Okay, see if you can think of something. The cat, lahavdil, walks because it has feet. Now it just moves from place to place. Human being, he conceptualizes reality. He walks in a real environment. A narrow path is not a real reality. The earth is a reality. And therefore he walks on the earth. Okay, so here's the question that I'd like we should contemplate. He walks on the earth, the entire earth, because that's reality. Like we said, this is the godly presentation, the godly creation, this real world. That's what we are working on. And from that perspective, we said many times, from that perspective, we are, wherever we stand, we are on the entire globe. We're not standing in a limited area just here. We are in the entire reality. You're standing on the entire globe, on the entire reality. Now, and from this perspective, remember we said, what Baal Shem Tov said, that because we're standing in entire reality, Mokim shiritzoyne shalodom shomhu. A person is where he wants to be. Because he's actually in the entire reality all the time. If he wants to be there, he is there. Wherever he wants to be, that's where he is. Because he perceives the standing on the reality of the world rather than on this particular isolated spot. So far, do I have you with me? Okay. So now, step down a point. Okay, so in the will, wherever he wants to be, he is. But when it comes down, practically speaking, if he really wants to be there physically, he has to walk from here to there. Right? When he perceives the idea of walking from place to place, what is that? How does that relate to the reality that he occupies to begin with?
One more time, when he conceives of walking from place to place, how does that relate to?
How does it relate to the total reality that he stands on? If he is everywhere at the same time, so how can he walk from place to place?
I mean, it's like shortchanging himself, right?
Why would he need to?
No, how is it? What is the concept there? What's the answer? The answer is what we are learning now. When he is standing on the entire reality, this is not a mitzias. It's not a measurable mitzias. He is here or there. He is everywhere at the same time. This is beyond time and space, beyond mitzias. This is Ayin efes in this concept, in this context. He is standing everywhere not because he's physically standing. He's standing here because everywhere is everywhere at the same time. Then when he steps down at a lower level and he perceives it as a mitzias, identifiable mitzias, then he can think of it as I have this place and I have two places. This is where the whole idea of mitzias is created. This huge reality, there are multiple places and I can be here and I can be there and I can walk from here to there. So, in this description that we have just now given, there are actually three distinct levels. There's the initial level where everything is everywhere at the same time.
Is it related to the 5 parts of the levels of the soul? Like, oh,
The first level is where we were saying there are 3 levels. The first is where
5 levels, no?
3.
Three levels, right? You said the whole reality is everywhere at the same time. But the whole, okay, I don't know why I'm going there, just because we were learning this, I don't want to skip.
Wait a second, so that's the first level.
That's the first thing.
What's the second one?
Now in this nekuda, at that point there is only one point. Then from this one point become, let's say, like you have a globe, right? You stand, whenever you stand on the globe, you're standing in the center of it. It's all one nakuda. Then from this one nakuda is developed a whole space. This is what's called chomer orishim. There is a whole um, accommodation of an infinite accommodation. This is like the first spread. And then within that spread you identify multiple places. This is like the Yitzira. This is where it becomes identifiable individual places. Okay. This is as far as we are going in this. The only principle that we can actually kind of relate to and understand is the principle of hischatshus. Something new. Something new is where it changes from nothingness into metzius, into a presence. Nothingness is the absolute truth itself, where it cannot not be, and then the metzius is where there is a presence. It's chachos. Okay, this is. I think I'm taking you much further than you're prepared to go. Okay. Okay, let's go to page Nun Hey, third line from the top. Ukamai marazal. All right, I'll tell you again. The value of this discussion for us is not that I can expect you to understand what this is, is that we should, for a moment, realize that the world is really a creation, a godly creation. It is not something that developed from within a worldly existence, between worldly parameters. One thing causes another, another thing causes another. There is a godly creation that created it out of nothing. It exists because God wants it to exist. That's what world is. Not because it developed in some kind of a sequential manner. In other words, I put it directly, world only appears as worldly. In reality is godly, not worldly. In reality is godly. It's a constant and total, perfect miracle of existence. That's what it is. There's absolutely no worldly justification for the world to exist. That is ultimately the point, the value of thinking along these lines. And this is why, coming back to our lives, this is why it is perfectly in line with our thinking. To say, I'm standing up, and I'm standing in front of the wall, and I'm standing in front of God. You say, I'm standing in front of a wall. I'm completely contained within the world. How am I standing in front of God? The answer is, world does not exist. But for the fact that God wants it. You follow this point here? This is the value, significance of this element. To understand these things in a definitive manner is way beyond our purview, our level of discussion. Okay? Okay. So the Olam Habriya is a real creation, meaning it's his chachus. His chachus means there is nothing preceding it that justifies its existence, and it exists only for the fact that God wants it to be. Created. K'maymer Azal, 3 lines from the top on Nun Hey. K'maymer Azal, as the Chazal say, Kol ma sheyesh bayabosho, yesh bayab. Everything that is present, that exists on the dry land, there is a counterpart and a similar creature present bayab under the water in the sea. So what is the principle that is dry land and the sea and the yam and the water, the sea? What's the difference between these two? The difference between these two is that it is known that this is a reference to two worlds. Zeho amodi is galio, ve'amodi is kasya. That this actually refers to these two worlds. Amodi is galio, the revealed world. The revealed world is the world on the dry land, and amodi is kasya is the concealed world, which is the world under the water. The waters conceal the creatures that are within it. What is it? So again, what does it mean? The waters conceal the creatures that are within it. You cannot see through the water, but the creatures are there. So this is what we're going to explain. The significance of this is a very profound significance. Hare. So then we say like this. Kol ma sheyesh bayabosho. Everything that exists on the dry land also exists in yam, in the sea. What's the difference? Rak, except, okay, here's where we can be able to kind of get a little tangible idea what this is about. Shahanivroim shebayam, the nevroim, the creatures in the waters, in the sea, muvloim b'mehayam. They are swallowed, sunk, completely imbued, completely embraced, the mehayam, in the waters of the yam. She'ein bechinas mitzius le'atzmon adayin, they're not in the state of mitzius le'atzmon, unto themselves. Adayin. Adayin means as yet, even though they're present there, you can touch them, but they're not really independent mitzius. Like we always point out. On the dry land, the creatures, no matter how lowly the creature is, it holds itself up. It stands on its own legs. It's conscious of its presence. And it's conscious of its presence to the point where it's holding itself up. It's standing up. The highest and the furthest of that is the human being who stands up on two legs. But all the creatures stand up with their own capability. The ability to stand up is a consciousness of its own presence. The Nevroim Shebiyam, they don't stand up. They are constantly being embraced by the waters. They're always in the state they're always in bed, like I pointed out.
Kvar nivra ba'olam briah. So, Is Yam here
Israel
briah?
and briah, right.
So this land and water is like a mashal to.
Briah and Yitzira. Amad is Kashin, Amad is Gali.
Huh.
Oh,
As if to say all comes out of the water. All is preceded by the concealed world. Thought precedes speech.
Right.
The water precedes land.
Yeah, there's the
Okay, well, the concept of
yeah,
yeah.
please understand what this is about. Okay. Amad is Kashin, yes, there are creatures there, but they're not a creature like the Rebbe explained. Einem bebechinas mitzius le'atzmon adayin. They're not as yet a mitzius unto themselves.
Right.
They cannot perceive themselves as a mitzius.
These are the
The
oisios.
water is there, so therefore they're a mitzius.
These are the fine letters that we had by Machshava.
Right.
Okay.
A mitzius le'atzmon is a very significant, very special principle. Let me see if we can get this. Mitzias le'atzman means that he perceives his mitzias such as, here I am, and here I'm not, and at this point that I am, my whole mitzias begins of this point. A whole reality. That's mitzias le'atzman. Beyond that question doesn't exist. Because there's no beginning. I'm embraced all the time. But the water is there, therefore I am there. But Yabosha it's not like that. I'm there where I begin. That's what Mitzias le'atzmo. Mitzias unto itself. Movloim b'mei hayom, they are swallowed up in the waters of the sea.
But-
She'ein al,
sorry, another question. But since all creatures in the sea are embraced into the water, how does it compare to human beings or creatures embraced into the air? It's a different,
totally different.
totally different.
Totally different. Yes, they are embraced by the air, but they perceive themselves, yes, I'm breathing, but I am breathing.
Yeah.
It isn't that I'm embraced and I don't have a mitzias unto myself. Like I said, when I stand, what makes me stand? What makes what makes a human being stand, which is the best example? What makes him stand? How does he stand?
On 2 feet.
On 2 feet? How is that?
He's the only creature that stands on 2 feet.
No, but how does he stand on 2 feet? What holds him up? Hello?
Yes,
What holds him up?
The sky.
he stands on his own.
Huh?
He stands on his own.
How is it? How does he stand? What is the meaning of him standing? The meaning of his standing is a statement. I am here.
So he stands because he is.
Because he is. His brain tells him. His brains hold him up.
Mm. Don't we have that he's held up? He stands because he senses how he's held up. Now we
What?
see that he stands because he senses a godly spirit, and this is what gives
So
him.
that's already Ayin.
Right.
It's not,
So this now seems to be he stands because due to his own mitzvah. Like,
no. He's sensing the Ayin. That's his own mitzvahs. He makes the Ayin into mitzvahs.
again, he senses the ayin.
Ayin is not holding him up. He is holding himself up on the Ayin because he is a mitzvahs. Come on, we say we can't confuse everything in the same pot. If he perceives Ayin, that's not holding him up. He holds himself up.
I mean, okay, here, I guess here we're identifying this sort of so-called independence.
Right.
Elsewhere we've had that his stance, his human stance, is based on the fact that he senses his godly spirit.
What is a godly spirit? We just finished saying. What is a godly spirit? Can you touch it?
Certainly not.
Okay, so what is it? What is holding him up?
It seems seemingly it's that sense of being connected above, which seems so similar
What
to...
is he connected to?
What is he
How is he
to?
connected?
Oh, it's an ayin. It's an ayin in this
How
world.
is he connected? Because of his consciousness of himself.
Yeah.
That means that he's
Consciousness
mitzvahs.
of himself, or this?
Consciousness that he's a mitzvahs, and this is what he's being held up by. He's holding himself up. He's holding himself up because there is a truth for his being.
Right. That there is a truth for his being is not sort of, that's consciousness of himself. That's
Yes,
okay.
his being, a truth for his being. If he would cease to think of his being, then he wouldn't be able to stand.
Right. But if he's really preoccupied with his being, he can't even breathe properly.
No.
It's different.
This is. Please understand what it means. He is a real being.
Mm-hmm.
He is conscious of. He knows that he is a being, and this is what's holding him up.
Mm-hmm.
The Brum Shebiyam do not have that consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to hold themselves up. It's not an effort on their part to be. I said they're in bed all the time.
A waterbed.
A waterbed, water mattress. And so this is what they are mitzias liatzim. They are the real mitzias. This principle, this Pshat HaMetzias, it has a self-identifying presence. Again, the reason he stands is because he knows that he has to stand, that he is a presence. Not because something is holding him up. It's true, they said there is Ayin Elikid, but he's conscious of the Ayin Elikid that says you can be. This is the brim should be abosha. All right. Now, let us then take this a step further. Now that we tortured ourselves through this, so the abosha, you have a mitzias that is conscious, that is really a mitzias, a real presence. B'yam, it's not a real presence. This is we'll still go through further. There is the following difference between these two creatures. The Abosha is conscious, is aware of its existence. But its existence is a very limited presence. I'm existent. This does not speak of existence in totality. It speaks I'm existent. And I have to hold myself up. I have the means by which to hold myself up, but nevertheless, this is a limited presence. The Bruim Shebiyam, they don't have the consciousness of their own existence. What then do they have? The consciousness of total existence, of the reality of existence. Right? I cannot, like we said, I cannot not exist, because whenever I turn, the water is there holding me, giving me life, holding me up. I cannot fall.
But they're not for real. So no.
Okay, 1 second. That's already relative to the creation, but the difference between what these two represent is lies in this. The Brim Shebayam represent a truth of existence in general, of an existence that cannot not be. And the Brim Shebayabosha represent a limited existence, but a true presence. It's a derivative of the higher type of existence that cannot not be. This is called Almodis Casio and Almodis Galio. Almodis Galio is a much limited type of existence, but it represents a truth of existence, of its existence.
This God is much limited, but it represents the.
But he is a true presence. Almodis Casio speaks of a fundamentally more real an existence that cannot not be. Like I cannot fall and hurt myself because my support is everywhere. That's what that is speaking in terms of truth of existence itself, a much higher level. But as far as this creature itself is concerned, there is not a real presence. On its own, it's being supported by the truth of existence. This is Almodis Kasi and Almodis Gali. This is Oishis HaMachshova and Oishis HaDibur. Okay? So I know Unison had a laugh. You got it. You got it. You got it. You got it. I say, don't fight, gentlemen. You're in Ayin. Be a bishop, but you have a place for each one of you.
We're just
There's room for both of you.
we're only
dancing.
we're only checking on our existence.
Are you for real? Am I for real?
All right. How do you like that?
It's really you.
Okay, with all this struggle, we stayed on target and we got through it. So all the contradictory terms begin to make sense.
So, just to confirm, all these mashalim, mashal corresponds to the word of Iskasia, corresponds to the word of the water
The
word,
water.
and dibur corresponds to the earthly existence,
Right.
to Isgalia, to
Isgalia.
okay, right.
And we understand the significance of each. Special message in each. And the greatest accomplishment is when the brightness of Amadis Kashya becomes recognized in Amadis Galia. This will pursue further.
Is that Eris the Toba Kelm the Tikkun or is that something else?
No, you're not able to complete.
Like is when the is how was it said? That is when
When the truth, the supreme truth of Amadis Kashya becomes recognized in Amadis Galia. Okay, listen, if we went through this, we will pursue it further. Okay? Okay, have a nice. Have a great day, a great evening, Hestos. We're going down Ma'ariv now.
Ki